Alright, so now that we're done with calculations, let's focus more on the graphing side. We are going to look, actually, unlike in class, we're going to look at the relationship between radius and the force of gravity here at the third video of these, when we kind of show you how to combine all that stuff together again. We're going to give you another example. Alright, so what we're going to do is, first of all, you can move around the graph just by using the scroll bars over here. Even though it seems like there's not enough room left, you can just keep going on as much as you possibly want. So I'm just going to move this over. So we're just worrying about the dependent and independent variables here. Alright, so dependent, again, as I've said earlier, it's a good habit to just get into putting units here. And like I did in class, I'm just going to make some units up for these and put that in parentheses. In science, there is really not a number that doesn't have a unit to go along with it, which is why it's such a good habit to get into. Also, a reminder of earlier, when I need to adjust columns, you can of course adjust them as wide as you want, or double click to bring them to the size of the greatest thing in the column. Alright, this is really where 2010 slightly differs, very, very slightly differs than 2013. So it doesn't differ in that the first thing you can do is click Insert. Now you can kind of see that this looks a lot different than it did in 2013. But really what I want is exactly the same. I still want this scatter plot, and it still gives me kind of the same options of connecting it, and I just want the data by itself. So I'll click on that. Now, as I told you in class, sometimes this happens. Excel believes that it knows what's best for me, and it tries to tell me what goes on there. Alright, and then we'll talk about how to fix that. The very first thing you do is, once you have this graph up here in Scatterplot, you want to tell Excel what graph you need. So I need to click Select Data. As stated before, you'll see the chart tools up here. That's not going to be available when I click somewhere else. The way to find it again is if you just click the chart, it'll be up here. If it's not on design, of course, you'll need it to be on design in order to select that data. Now you're going to get something like this. If you already have data on here and you don't want it on there, this is going to have a series here. You're just going to remove everything that it tells you that you need. Once you're down to kind of this blank sheet, you can then hit Add and put in the data that you'd like. Quick reminder, you don't want your chart to be over top of the data that you're looking at when you're trying to select it, because you'll notice I can't select the chart right now to move it around. If you're only dealing with one series or one set of data on the same graph, there's really not a good reason to give it a series name, so don't worry about that. So we're going to skip over that, go straight to X values. So you're going to click on the X box, and then you're going to highlight what you want your numbers to be. Some people accidentally made the mistake of selecting the title during this. Make sure that you just collect the data. So I'm going to select the top piece of data here and slide all the way down. I have all of those numbers. Alright, now I've got all my X values. This 1 here, as stated in class, is a placeholder. You have to have a 1 there, otherwise Excel's going to get angry with you when you move other things around. But you also need to make sure and get rid of it before you actually select your Y values, or Excel will yell at you again. So now that I've got that, same thing as before, except I'm going to do it with whatever I want my Y variable to be. Alright, once that's done, I'm going to hit OK. Hit OK again. And now I've got my graph right in front of me. If your Excel tries to give you a legend, I usually just delete that, because there's unless there's more than one set of information, there's really not a reason to have that. Alright, so now another difference between 2013 and 2010. In class I showed you that right up here would give you the options of the chart title and those axis titles. I'm not entirely sure. We're going to have to try to find this here real quick. Nope. Let's try here. Let's go to Layout. There we are. See, you can have Layout, Format. Here we are. We have Layout, and I want to put a chart title. So I'm just going to put Centered over. Nope, I don't want that. I want it to be above chart. There we go. And then I'm going to put axis titles on here. Horizontal. There we are. And then a vertical, and I want it rotated. There it is. I want it rotated. Okay. Now that I've got these on here, I'll place on the appropriate titles. Now that we have the appropriate titles on there, I'll show you a couple things. First, just make sure that the If you don't have another name for it up here, the best way to do the title is just the y variable versus the x variable. You'll also notice that I've labeled these, and always make sure to place your units on there so that someone knows what the heck is going on with your graph. The only other piece left of the puzzle as far as the graph is concerned is adding the trend line. So the best way to do that is, well, first of all, I'll show you this. If you left click, if you just click on the data, the first thing that you'll see, and this can be useful at times, is see what data it's actually selecting. So earlier, of course, when I commented that people had made a mistake of adding the title, you would see this box enclosed as well, and you can actually change that. Now, if you right-click the data on your chart here, you're going to see Add Trend Line. So we're going to click that. And this also looks slightly different than 2013, but it gives me all the same options. First thing I try to knock out is make sure you have the equation and the r-squared value selected. Now, and I'm going to go back to the trend line here by clicking on it. Now I'm going to try to pick the appropriate function. Mostly in this class, you're only going to be dealing with power functions and linear functions. So in this particular case, we're going to deal with the power function. As I stated in class, you'll notice that the polynomial fits pretty darn well. The only thing that changes, you actually might have noticed over here, is what equation is actually seen. So we're going to look at the power function here. The r-squared value tells us how close the data is to the line that we're on. So 0.99 is pretty stinking close. That would be amazing data if you got that in class. Alright, and that's how you create your chart.